All right, my friend. So I have a treat for you today. I have Operator Starsky and Anna from Ukraine here with me, and they both graciously agreed to join me because I really wanted to get their perspective of two broad questions. And before I do that, I want to say thank you to both Starsky and Anna. You're here to support me as I'm here to support my viewers who are all here to support Ukraine. So there's this cascading effect of like you went out of your way for me, and I'm going out of my way to ask my viewers what they want to ask you. And it's because they really deeply care about supporting Ukraine. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Professor.
so
You know,
much.
it's
Little delay in the
after you.
team. That's
No,
okay.
no, like we are equals. If ladies are not first, then the gentlemen, please.
Well,
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, you know, the collaboration is always really cool, especially in our environment of Ukrainians and pro-Ukrainians. We're basically like, you know, like Justice League, like Batman, Flash, and Superman, like in this case. And it's, you know, it's always a pleasure to be here.
It's really interesting to see how we come from different perspectives, but there's a great synergy that comes from the pro-Ukraine YouTubers that are out there that they just find different niches in order to do what they can from where they are. Like I qualify that like I'm just a professor trying to explain that because I'm not Starsky. Like that's why I'm saying this. I'm not a military guy. I'm just trying to help you think about how to think about the war, right? Like that's what I'm trying to do. By the way, I'm outranked here as well because Anna is way above me academically. Yeah. Okay. So I explain myself as Professor Gerdes, but yeah, she outranks me. So
Uh, you're just too kind to us. And I think it's going to be like that. And I would like to continue expressing my gratitude to people, not just YouTubers, but all of our viewers, whom we often call friends, because in reality, they have already done a lot
mhm.
to back up Ukraine and to change and shift opinions. And this is really working. We all discuss the X case as something negative, but social media is here for long, and there are lots of positive cases, starting with the campaigns like NAFO getting more drones to the front lines,
Mhm.
and finishing with the serious influence on the international politics and done in an open and good way. Like when people literally, after watching your videos, and by the way, I'm very grateful for those who have a choice. Like I am a Ukrainian, I am in Ukraine, and I literally don't have a choice, but you have a choice. You can speak about anything you want, but you've chosen to be a friend, to be on this mission, to be together with us. And there are hundreds and thousands of people who actually wrote to the representatives, who changed the opinion of some deputies in the EU, in Canada, in the United States or Australia. And it really works. And it's amazing that we are joining, making each other stronger. And it is another proof and hope that we can defeat this evil both on the internet, on the streets of Kyiv, and other Ukrainian cities.
So I have two broad questions for you, and that is, what are Ukrainians feeling with everything that's going on? Like you have North Koreans in Ukraine, Trump elected, Biden finally allowing long-range weapons, nuclear doctrine changes, and then Ukraine hits with the long-range weapons. Then you have the ICBM in Dnipro. Like it's been a whirlwind. So tell me how you're processing, not just even you can say speak for everyone you know, right? Like, how are Ukrainians processing these kinds of events? And then the second question will be, how do you perceive Russia trying to alter the narrative? And we can go pretty much anywhere within here, but my audience has some questions that I'll slip in periodically along the way.
Well, I will speak from the civilian perspective, and then perhaps Andrei will be able to dive into more complex things. But speaking about the attitudes in Ukraine, I feel the majority of us are more optimistic, at least, than my subscribers. And I was actually happy to learn that some of them felt a new wave of strength and resilience after us commenting on, let's say, this intercontinental ballistic missile, or our determination to win and not to negotiate on any negative terms and appease the dictator. One thing that people who observe Russo-Ukrainian war from abroad forget is that Russia on daily basis targets Ukraine with missiles. Russia on daily basis kills Ukrainians, and it's not like we are constantly under threat, but it didn't happen yet, and the decisions should be made out of fear. Ukrainians have already overcome this fear, and we clearly know that by appeasing Putin, letting Russia win this war, we only lead to more victims, to more problems, both in Ukraine and then in further other countries. Because just have a look from this totally different perspective. If we appease Putin, agree on his terms, what do we get? Lots of destroyed Ukrainian territories and lives, and a war criminal that receives a prize for doing that all. And of course, just as in case with Crimea, that will continue. I've spent this week in Kyiv when the US embassy was closed and many other, and I definitely know that Russia will use this narrative to threaten, first of all, our allies, because Ukrainians seem to be more confident and experienced in that. And I know a lot of good people who actually worry and advise us, maybe you should stop, maybe you should, when nobody actually wants that here. And cafes were working underground and shops, and people were doing the ordinary things. And Russia will try to use this threat, because we don't know if this, and maybe Andriy will speak more in detail about this Oreshnik missile, whether it is something new or simply a renamed, upgraded version of some old crap. Moreover, it's not the first time that they use missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear warheads to Ukraine. Iskander missiles can actually do that. But they try to change the narrative because they believe that fear, unfortunately, works with many, and many decisions can be made based on this fear. And I always ask the viewers, the friends, to build their conclusions based on Ukrainian wishes and Ukrainian experiences. If we're not afraid for us, so don't be over afraid for us.
So that's wonderful. That actually answered one of my viewer questions, which is, how are Ukrainians so fearless in war? And you answered that when you and Yulia and I were talking about, hey, we're not even afraid of nukes. This is what they're doing to us every day. I was like, really? How? Okay, so that's wonderful. Starsky, by the way, I did highlight your cafe picture from Twitter or Blue Sky, I don't remember which, in one of my videos, because that was just awesome. The embassy's closed and she's taking a picture of the cafes are open. So, okay, Starsky.
Yeah, if cafeterias are open, then we are still there. We're still fighting. That's 100%. And I agree with Anna on the fact that we support each other. Ukrainians were motivated by the international community in the very, very beginning of this full-scale invasion. I remember that clearly when hundreds and thousands of people from all around the world were expressing their support in the commentaries. And nowadays, Ukraine does the same towards the international community, because I remember a lot of people were extremely dissatisfied, for example, with the results of the elections in the United States. Not just dissatisfied, but I would say demoralized. And we try to support them as much as possible and motivate those people. And I'm sure that they're more or less fine now, because there will be always tomorrow, no matter what happens. And tomorrow will always be better. But generally, what we feel now is that we are in the World War III. Basically, the World War III is out there. In Ukraine, we have Russians, we have North Korean troops, we have Iranian weapons striking our cities, and basically Ukrainians are already, they stepped into World War III. Europe is preparing, and one thing I wanted to mention is that among the Russian goals, the goals of the objectives of the Russian disinformation and Russian propaganda is to increase the level of fear among the European citizens regarding like tomorrow, fear of future. It was stated in different documents, in the documents belonging to the social design agency that ran all that Europe and in the United States. And one of their objectives is to increase the level of fear and level of anxiety among the European citizens, which is nowadays because, I'm comparing Ukrainians like morale or, I don't know, stance. Before the full scale, it wasn't as strong as in Europe nowadays, because back then in Ukraine, I remember I was making like tutorial videos for civilians, what to do in case of emergency and yada yada, as well as for our territorial defense battalions. And people in the commentaries would usually, Ukrainians, it was before the full-scale invasion, they would usually tell me escalating, like sowing panic, etc., because they were panicking themselves, basically. It's very scary to the war. But nowadays, I see, Germany, Sweden, Norway, or already for at least for civilians, they prepare, and I don't see much panic. I believe that Russians will try to use whatever resources they have to increase this panic. After the elections in the United States, they have much resources they can spend on disinformation and warfare in general in Europe. But I see that governments are working, they're planning, military personnel is also planning, and civilians are preparing, those who is smart enough, of course, and there's no panic whatsoever, because they understand that Ukraine wasn't a NATO member. That is why Ukraine still keeps fighting for almost 3 years, bleeding and losing plenty of civilians, unfortunately, to the terror Russian strikes. And using our experience, Europeans, I'm not sure about America, but Europeans are preparing to make sure that they will save as many civilian lives as possible and withstand the Russian aggression together, collectively, which is extremely important.
So it seems almost perverse that you have to console Americans and Europeans about U.S. elections. It just seems completely backwards. So I want to ask two parts here. So how do Ukrainians deal with the frustration of our slow response and weakness to not escalate the war? Because we just have this aversion, right? Like, we don't want to upset Putin. Then the second question was almost a flip of that. Do you personally want to see the conflict escalate? I'm of two minds. Obviously, the increase in loss in life is terrible, but when I read the news about Russia using ICBMs, part of me was happy, because if Putin keeps escalating, it could eventually open the door to receiving better and long-range weapons and things along those. You understand where they're going with that? So it's almost like what happened with Kharkiv. Like, once Kharkiv was really under assault, Biden started getting serious and going, "Whoa, okay, maybe we got to do something different here." What do you all think in those? How do you process the frustration of? I mean, I'm frustrated. You've got to be just. What do you see? We'll go with ladies first, generally speaking. How about that?
Okay, well, I am not a frustrated lady, definitely. And I think I was at the very start of the invasion, and Operator Starsky has beautifully described. I was perhaps one of those who would say, don't escalate. I was choosing the articles that say, no, it's not likely, it's irrational. But people in Europe and in the United States actually had these 3 years of Ukrainian resilience to see what is happening and how it is developing. And now it's not just Russia. Let's be realistic. It's also North Korea, it's Iran, and it's very visible China that stopped hiding its military support to Russia. So I think taking into account how important language is, and by the way, Andrei has another very good project on Russian disinformation and propaganda to fight it, we can clearly understand it's super important to use correct terminology. And correct terminology would be not just Russia-Ukrainian war. Right now, it's Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China war. Without the support of these countries, Russia would not be able to continue, and we could celebrate Ukrainian victory. So when
I'm going to be
actually
rude and
our
interrupt you for just a moment. That's a really freaking important point. That thing that it's not just a Ukrainian war, that is crazy important. I don't know why I didn't start saying this before, but I'm going to start saying this now and give you credit for it. That is
that's why we
really
learned
powerful.
from
No,
yeah
seriously,
we learned
that
uh,
this is at least Russia, North Korea, and probably Russia, North Korea, Iran, and maybe China.
China backed up their economy, and it seems to me that recently was on the global news that China supplied Russia with something openly already militarily. And like we clearly understand that there would be no North Korean soldiers in Ukraine if China did not allow that, because North Korea survives only because of China lets it to survive. So obviously these are like 4 countries against Ukraine. So it is totally okay if some countries support us with weapons, with skills, because I sometimes get the comments like, oh, if you cannot win this war alone, then you shouldn't have started. But in reality, we have like Russia, the largest country in the world, that claimed to have the second strongest army, now backed up by thousands of North Korean soldiers. And it's definitely not a signal of strength. Come on. You never want to invite foreign army in your borders to do the job for you, because it's quite unpredictable. Maybe these North Korean soldiers will stay and start controlling Russia for China. How can you know what happens in 2 or 3 years? It seemed unpredictable that Ukrainian soldiers will fight with North Koreans in Kursk, right? Just half a year ago. So we cannot know what happens. Maybe China will hijack Russia. But of course, escalation management does not work, and it is one of those words that you should not use with a Ukrainian, same as Russian elites or red lines and so on. And unfortunately, all of this vocabulary was also introduced by our allies, who used them and actually gave Russia an idea. It was not Putin who first started speaking about, like, let's not escalate and so on. And escalation management does not work.
Right.
And I don't know, it would be interesting for me to hear Andrei's opinion. He's more professional in this point of view. But as an ordinary, not frustrated and not anxious lady, I would like it to end with the collapse of Russia. And if we want like this modern regime, and if we want that, if we want defeat and demilitarization, unfortunately, it has to escalate. Because this slow murdering of Ukrainians, it does not give hopes to the democratic world in general. And if we freeze it, if we leave it the way it is, it's just a big prize for Putin. Just a prize. And nothing will stop him if the world closes its eyes on so many war crimes, on Bucha, on Mariupol, on Kakhovka Dam explosion, on Children's Cancer Hospital destroyed, on lists of Ukrainian teachers and journalists that were revealed and Russia wanted to execute. After all of this, after North Korean troops in Ukraine, there are rumors they've crossed the Kharkiv region border, then nothing can be punished on this planet, and we will see an epidemic of various wars and conflicts. And I also agree with Zaluzhny and with Andriy that this sad world war has already started. It is just dispersed, like multipolar world is what Putin speaks about, and multipolar wars.
Yep. Starsky?
Regarding the ammo shortages, of course, the frustration is present, unfortunately. And on the other hand, I don't really remember the time when there was no ammo shortage at Ukrainian front. There were 2 times, actually. I clearly remember 2 times. two small periods where when Ukrainian, for example, HIMARS operators reported that they have like plenty of missiles that they can use against all of the targets that were designated for them and stuff. But generally, we should remember two things. One thing is that Ukraine is not fighting because we receive so many military supplies. In fact, we are fighting because, in spite of the shortage, we are fighting despite the fact that we don't receive enough. That is one thing. And another thing is a lot of European countries also provide Ukraine with ammunition, with weaponry, and I talked about it in the previous video. It's like currently the military support for Ukraine costs Europeans approximately 1.5 cup of coffee a day. And generally speaking, they can they can totally afford like 3 cups of coffee a day. If, for example, the military aid to Ukraine is stopped by the United States, because there's still Europe, there's still countries that make it, I would say, 50% of the annual NATO GDP, which is European countries. So frustration is present, but there's nowhere to run for Ukrainians. We keep doing what we're doing. As for the escalation, the fact is Putin is the one who escalates. It's not really possible to escalate beyond what Putin does. And the question is not whether we should escalate more, because we are not the ones who attacked. We are not the ones who wage the hybrid warfare in Europe and in the US. We should probably stop this escalation by stopping Putin. That is the only way to finish the war and to finish this, whatever they call escalation on the West. That's my opinion.
So, as you were speaking, actually, as both of you were speaking, I had this thought about when I was in graduate school, I was poor, but I was never broke. Okay, I was eating lots of ramen noodles and cheese and crackers, and I just didn't have any money, but I always had hope. That's what I hear where you are, right? Even if you have the ammo shortage, you're poor, but you're not broke. Like, there's a great optimism here of we're going to keep going. Okay, tell me about the Russian narrative and what you perceive of what they're trying to make the world see, as opposed to what you actually see and experience and feel. What misinformation or disinformation do you see? Is it infecting Ukraine, or at least the wider Western narrative?
That's a good question. Thank you. And I think there are too many different Russian narratives tailored specifically for the countries they are spread in. And this is what makes Russian propaganda actually very advanced. And it's super easy to operate in the world where people believe there is no truth, there are multiple truths, and that's what they use. But what I don't like right now, it was circulating, especially in the United States too, that like Ukraine is demolished, nothing left, all these beautiful churches, they do not exist anymore. And I constantly have this feeling like, oh my God, people are doing their best. People are working in Kharkiv, in Sumy. They demonstrate their resilience, and actually it's very important to stay in these cities and make them alive, because one of Putin's plans is that all people abandon Ukraine and he simply gets this distorted, destroyed desert. That's why I greatly respect those who, despite shortages and bombings, remain there, go to school, to the hospital, and so on. And many of Ukraine is the country that you can actually like. And I think it's very wrong to provide any conclusions on Ukraine if you haven't visited the country and you haven't experienced that with your own eyes. I mean, like saying, no, there is no more country left, so let's just appease Putin. When in reality, there are lots of good and brave people standing and saving this country. And unfortunately, Putin saw that fear works, and he now acts as a classical bully. He keeps frightening, the so-called leaders, and many of them are much weaker than actually the people who represent them. I'm sure you've experienced that on your channel, and there are some countries and some governments where I separate people and the representatives they have, because people turn out to be stronger. And what they try to, Putin keeps frightening, terrifying the world, and he will use it. Just like this very recent example with Oreshnik intercontinental ballistic missile. Once again, he decided like to say that he will announce launches of such missiles when, like, if you have 500 cabs, which are huge bombs, dropped on a city in a week, it is literally the same, perhaps, than a tactical nuke on that city. There are lots of devastating things Russia does, but it does not appear on the TV channels. People do not speak about that. And then we see Putin speaking about the warnings that he will express before launching this missile in Ukraine or anywhere else. And he may not, but he wants to keep using it as a threat to keep people frightened, so that you constantly check what he is saying. And in this situation, who is the leader? Right, Putin. And it is a great problem that all of this war is led as a reaction, but not at a set moment of time action against him. And all of the bans, they are lifted after he escalates and does something awful, and then all good people realize, well, we gotta do something because it doesn't look good. Okay, just as it was with Kharkiv, now with long-range missiles. And in reality, we could have saved thousands of lives by letting do this before. And many people whom I follow, military experts, NATO generals, they speak that the time for political decisions is long gone. It is no more like you can make political decisions, escalation management, whatever you want, until the red line, the only red line, that is the Ukrainian border, internationally recognized, was crossed. At the moment when real war begins, the decisions have to be military. And from the military perspective, to not let Ukraine strike, to not let Ukraine target oil refineries, this is very wrong. So unfortunately, we see this like very distorted strategy, still very much based on politics, when in reality, it is very easy to defeat and demilitarize Putin when having Ukrainian determination, Ukrainian people on the ground, and advanced technologies, which we can use because of many reasons, starting from Putin's constant threats to the world and finishing with the Budapest Memorandum.
Same question, Starsky, about Russian narratives.
There are two main narratives that we can see right now. One of the narratives is that Russia is not your enemy. Russia is a good, peaceful country. Don't believe anybody who says the opposite. And on the other hand, we can see Putin changing his nuclear doctrine, Putin using ballistic missiles against Ukraine, which, by the way, some people in the commentaries were saying, like, all the ICBMs were nuclear, you know, or like that one was not ICBM. The fact is, Russians designate Rubezh RS-26 as intercontinental ballistic missile, but on the English Wikipedia, it's designated as intermediate range missile, which is interesting. But the fact is, what's the difference between Oreshnik and Rubezh? It's basically the same as between Shahed and Geran 2. You know, it's basically the same thing. So why are those two main narratives, why are they so confusing? Because they're controversial. On one hand, they're saying that we are your friends. On the other hand, they're using ballistic missiles and threaten to strike Poland, for example. They threaten to strike the American missile defense base located in Poland. They basically openly say that they consider this base one of the top priority targets for the Russian troops. And nuclear doctrine. Why is that? That is literally because Russians are trying to convince everybody that they were defamed by your government, your evil Western government. Mm-hmm. You are good people. You can live in Russia if you share our conservative Russian values, Russian culture, whatever. You can easily come here. You can live. You can have benefits. We can be friends. But it's all, your government. It's bad. So they are basically calling people for uprising. They're calling people not to trust their government, not to trust their authorities, and basically lose the unity within their countries. That is their classic strategy, something that we've seen in Ukraine. I think that Anna will agree, not even since like 2014. I think it was like since 2003 maybe. Something around that, 2004, 2005, definitely. So those are two main narratives that you can see. Russians will keep terrifying people because they need to destroy morale in Europe, in the United States, and they will also try to convince you that they're actually good guys. Actually, it's your yesterday's allies, British, French, they are the bad guys, Polish bad guys. You gotta be with Russia, everything will be fine together. We can find whatever, peace, and we can cooperate. So those are the things. And in the future, I believe that we will see, unfortunately, escalating informational warfare in Europe because a lot of their resources, as I already mentioned, were aimed at the American elections. Russian agencies were massively involved into sowing discord in the American society. Not generally even, by supporting one or another candidate, but literally by trying to make the voters of different candidates fight each other and hate each other, which is again something they do all the time. They did that in Ukraine 2019. That was exactly the case. Anna, you probably remember the main narratives that were used against both Ukrainian candidates back then in 2019. People were saying that Poroshenko was corrupted and had connections with Medvedchuk and Russian oligarchs. At the same time, Zelensky was uneducated, unexperienced, and he loved Russia too much. And he was basically about to give up Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, he was blamed of, having concerts in Kremlin, having gigs for Russian oligarchs and Putinoids and Russian politicians. But that's that's Ukrainian experience, and that's exactly what we see in the United States nowadays, and not only in the United States. Unfortunately, Russian hybrid warfare continues for quite a while, for years, and I think that back in the Cold War, back in the times of the Cold War, they already used same methodology as nowadays. But again, because European countries already start, I would say, waking up a bit, they start preparing to this. They start to increase their anti-disinformational measures, their counter-propagandist measures. Baltic countries, Poland, good example, and hopefully we will see that in the rest of the European countries as well.
I have now about 20 minutes, and I want to shift gears to quicker answers about more personal things. Okay, is Putin's strategy of weakening the morale of Ukraine's population by systematically attacking energy and heating in residential buildings, is that working in Ukraine at all, or is it more like the British who stood up under the Blitz and were like, I mean, it was like, we're not going to back down. Is it more like that?
I honestly don't know how sitting in cold and dark because of Putin, you can change your opinion and decide to obey him or support him. Of course, when you feel cold or you want to take, I don't know, a warm shower, you feel a little bit sad, but it definitely makes our morale only stronger. And I know Andrei will support me that one of the best uh, mechanisms that Ukrainians have developed is to transform our fury, our hate into donations. And typically, after a day when something really bad happens, instead of expressing hatred, I don't know, despair on social media, we simply donate more than usual on that day. Because I think that it only makes us more confident that Russia must be defeated.
Okay. Starsky, thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree on that. Ukrainian of coping with, facing everyday's challenges by literally donating huge sum of money to Ukrainian producers of drones. And there's another thing, when people sitting in cold and dark, without heating and everything, under shell and missiles, it doesn't really work like Putin expects. And just, I think it's connected to the previous question. Once I received this commentary in Russian language on my channel, that from a Russian degenerate who literally said, "Да, мы тупые, злобные, и мы дохнем, но мы победим," which means, yes, we are stupid, evil, and we die in big numbers, but we will definitely win. Which, when you already admit that you are stupid and evil and you die in big numbers, then winning is not an option at all.
They admitted part one. So the logic that follows might not necessarily matter that much.
Look, here I have, again, it's a different thing, but here I have a beautiful picture of a Miss Russia, okay? You can see this absolutely amazing creation of sick Russian mind. I think that they have absolutely no chance. Ukrainians have hope. We believe that we can definitely win. And do we believe in miracles that NATO troops will have their boots on the ground in Ukraine? No, but we believe in different kinds of miracles that helped us to withstand corrupted regime back in 2014 during the Revolution of Dignity, that helped us withstand the Russian hybrid invasion between 2014 and 2022. And I believe that this kind of magic will definitely help us as well. But the biggest magic that we have right now is enormous Ukrainian resilience.
Now, I think I know the answer to the next question, but somebody posed this, and I thought, that's interesting. Knowing that good people will die, would you still have supported the Maidan back in 2014? I think I know what the answer is, because the broader
100%.
context of if you didn't do it. Go ahead.
People don't understand. Well, first of all, today is the Remembrance Day of victims of Holodomor. Mm-hmm. This is a great tragedy that traumatized Ukrainian society and altered it greatly. We've lost millions. There are different numbers in different researches, and Russia still keeps the documents closed in the archives even before the start of the war and after the collapse of the USSR. Mm-hmm. I mean, in this period when the relations seemed normal, all the documents were hidden, and Russia does not recognize it, when in reality, many, like I would say, lots of democratic countries already have recognized Holodomor as genocide. It happened in 1932-33. There were other Holodomors, but it happened long ago before NATO interfered. NATO did not exist at that moment. So Maidan was not a coup funded by CIA or supported by NATO. Russians are desperate. They are afraid of this kind of freedom. And what actually makes me confident in Ukrainian victory is our civil society. And our civil society is the one that corrects our government, improves our laws. Unfortunately, we don't do it evolutionary, we make it revolutionary. But what people forget is that if we go into the orbit of Russia, and that was a reaction, Ukraine wanted to remain a European country. It all started as a Euromaidan. And Putin planned the silent annexation of Ukraine as Belarus. Same brave people, great people, Ukrainian intellectuals, Ukrainian patriots would die. This is what happens to people on the temporarily occupied territories. What many don't understand is not just the change of the flag and, I don't know, a new anthem that you need to sing. There is a very different, oh, it reacts to my
Yeah,
hand.
you raised your hand.
I did not, I just, it did. We have to realize that they want to change ideology, lifestyle, they deny language, they deny culture. So thousands and millions would still die and disappear, but the only like difference, you wouldn't have known about that. Just like Holodomor, it was underreported, they did
Yeah, that's
everything to
powerful.
hide it. Millions were dying in Soviet communist labor camps during 60s and 70s, and I'm always impressed that one of the great Ukrainian poets, Vasil Stus, who was also a victim of this political repressions, he died in 1986. I was already born. So this Russia was killing Ukrainians for speaking Ukrainian, writing Ukrainian in times when I was already born, not in the last century, like in the Russian Empire or something like that. So it is very real. And letting Russia do what it wants does not mean that, well, you give people worse economic and cultural conditions, but they all live and prosper. No, you kill them silently behind the Iron Curtain. And standing against it, we at least have a chance. And that's what we are fighting for, a chance to live our own life and remain free and independent.
I assume that you would go down this direction with that, because if you had just been willing to knuckle under and be a satellite state of Russia, the fight wouldn't be there, but you'd also be enslaved effectively. And Starsky, I know that you had some greater background there. So your answer?
I'm very glad that Anna mentioned Holodomor, because back in 32, 33, there was no war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine was occupied. And for some unexplainable reason, 10 million Ukrainian civilians died, you know. So there are, and had we known, back then that there will be war, we already knew, because 2013, we were smoking with the guys outside of the revolutionary Kiev city hall at the Maidan, and we were talking about it, and we were talking with the guys that if revolution is successful, then Putin will definitely take Crimea, and boom, that's exactly what happened just a couple of months later. So we already knew back then what to expect. We were prepared to this, and two more things that people watching us must always remember is that Ukrainians are the people who will never tolerate injustice. Never. And Russians are the people who will always be atrocious. Knowing those two things, you must understand that no matter what you do, Russians will always try to kill as many civilians as possible, because this is their nature. This is what they do throughout history. They will try to invade other countries. I don't know how many else examples people need to understand that Russia is literally the biggest evil of the 21st century that humankind is facing nowadays. And Ukrainians will always fight against injustice, against repressions, because even during Holodomor in 1932 and 1933, there were approximately 3,000 uprisings officially recorded by the Russian authorities, but Ukrainians, even back there, they were uprising against Russian repressions and Russian atrociousness. Therefore, Ukrainians will never tolerate whenever somebody likes to rule them, assimilate them, or kill them or do or decide their future for them.
Okay, I've got to move quickly here because I still have five 5 questions. How are you really doing? Like, my viewers wanted to know how you two are doing. Like, that's a very kind question because they really do care about you all. That we've never met in person. They've never met you in person, but they want to know that you're okay.
Oh, we are okay as long as you ask us these questions. And I actually want to tell you that these are communities, they are amazing and they have changed a lot in my life personally. There are lots of decisions that I made based on the advice I received from the friends. There are moments when we also feel down and then we feel this support. And I think that we actually charge each other with this positive energy, with courage, and it's amazing because it works. And whenever I receive questions and I realize that people have made this choice, from one point of view, now it's quite obvious that this is a bigger war than we wanted. And it does look like a world war. Maybe we will give it a name later because once again, the first and the second were not named like that at the
Mhm.
moment they happened. But at the same time, at the very start of Russian full-scale invasion, people made a choice to support Ukraine, to follow Ukraine, not to escape, not to close their monitors when they get something that YouTube or Instagram blurs. And I'm very grateful for this choice, for this bravery that you actually make when you want to understand what's happening. I think this war is the one where it's easy to pick the side. It's quite obvious, like we are fighting inside of Ukrainian borders for our territories and for
Mhm.
our people. And any Russian who wants to survive has a chance to return back home to Mother Russia. But there's so much work to do and so many things to fight for or against.
Okay. How are Ukrainians heating their apartments with no electricity or with limited electricity? Early in the war, I saw people selling homemade wood stoves that were supposed to be used for this purpose. Is that happening, or is it too much of a fire hazard, or what? Just being cold, or what's going on?
I think I will answer that. There are stoves that can be installed in the houses. For example, my father uses one to heat his apartment. It's a fire hazard, but dying from cold is also hazardous. That's why you gotta choose what's best for you. So that's one of the things. Of course, we're trying to wear more warm clothes. Ukrainians have warm clothes because generally winter in Ukraine is kind of cold, kind of chilly usually. But it's not something that can literally make Ukrainians give up. I mean, having no heating, no central heating or no electricity is not something that can make Ukrainians literally give up to Russians and die.
Okay, winter's here. What's the best way for people in other countries to help the elderly and others find comfort during the winter? They're asking
Well,
about
I
charities, for example, that they can give to for this kind of purpose.
I think Christmas period is coming, and I personally plan to share a list of charities on my community tab that you can choose and support. Of
Awesome.
course, everything depends on what region these people are, because once again, there are semi-safe regions where people can continue their more or less normal living with really short periods without electricity. And the closer you are to the front lines, the more you experience. So I will try to provide more information about those extremely war-affected regions.
Okay. Next thing was, do either of you know good well, you just talked about the good volunteer programs, so I'm gonna skip that one. Is there a fund accepting donations that gets generators into family housing where infrastructure has been destroyed? I wanna help defense against cold. Children need some comfort in their homes. And just the questions that people are asking that they just care. It
The Frontline Kid project, Richard, you can find him on X. I'm not sure if he's on Blue Sky already, but he talked that during the recent strike on Lviv, there was a family that actually lost their windows and stuff, and they were helping them. So they have this project, the charity project, that also helps those people. Generally, anything can be found on Google. I can personally recommend Richard and not the Frontline Kid. The Frontline Kid is project of the bigger charity, right? But them I can literally advise to contact.
Thank you very much. Now, we have 3 minutes. Any last words, anything that you want to say to the viewers here that you wanted to say earlier, just couldn't get out because somebody else was talking or asking a question or whatever? No, I didn't mean you. I was I just meant because another person was
like we're
talking.
all friends. Yeah. I will keep it short, and I will not say anything like that I brought myself to this conversation, but things that I've learned from you, which once again underline how important both of your channels are. And first of all, Darin, thank you for giving us this home, I won't say platform, to share our opinions. And second, Operator Starsky beautifully, like I will have it in my brain now, describe this huge civilizational difference between us and Russians, that we cannot tolerate injustice, and that on the contrary, they are all about violence, they are all about getting resources but not producing something. And I even had this like magical thinking on that maybe it was just like designed by God that we have to be here on the border with Russia to like not tolerate their injustice, because if someone less determined would work and stay, it might be a bigger problem. And I would like also to quote one of my friend's subscribers who recently sent me a beautiful phrase ascribed to Napoleon, who said that courage is just like love. To flourish, it needs a hope. It needs some hope. And I think that all this, even nerves and anxiety, all of these questions, all of these beautiful wishes and questions, how to help Ukrainians heat their homes or how to help Ukrainians defeat the enemy, it all gives us a very, very, very strong hope, which we transform into courage. And I am sure, like everybody wants to live in the world where people like Ukrainians who defend their history, their borders, win, and not people who loot, rape, and destroy. So that's why we have to stay united, and we actually demonstrate that on your beautiful conversation today.
Starsky?
Yeah, and in order to make it possible, Anna, we should cooperate more, I think. And in continuation to what you said, I just want to add that, we should not only ask each other, how can we help? But we should generally ask each other, how are you? Because this question was extremely touching to me personally. I could nag a lot about, the fact that I'm recovering again from a different flu and stuff. That's why I didn't stream for a week. But, comparing to what our soldiers are going through at the front line, it's nothing. And, because we have this incredible community, because we have Professor Gerdes, we have brave Anna from Ukraine and Smart, and because we have you, dear viewers, I feel fantastic. That's my answer.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Anna, for also titling the video with it's not the Ukrainian war, it's the Russian, North Korean, Iranian, China war on Ukraine. That's so freaking brilliant. I don't know why I didn't think about that before. It's like I was talking to Greg Terry yesterday or the day before, and he said, yeah, well, so they're talking about the IC or the long-range missile strikes on Russian territory. Well, if they really believe what they were saying, they've been doing it to Crimea for a year. They don't really believe it.
That is
Whoa! How did I not see that?
They have put it in their constitution, and they now recognize Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea as Russia, according to their laws, This is Russia, but still you understand they don't treat it as Russia because they
That's
are
right.
okay with
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
All right. On that positive note, we'll end. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you, viewers, for asking those awesome questions.